The policymakers need to have the adaptability and the opportunity to change them accordingly in order to achieve the goals in time. The process of monitoring is very long, but we believe that all we need is a structured, comparable, relevant, and regular data, which can be analyzed in time and in order for us to achieve set goals. Next slide.
Okay, so the small producers need an application that helps them manage those issues. Of course, this has to be done in a cost-efficient way, which we believe is very important for the small producers. So what we came up with was an application that measures the farmer's footprint and tells them about their strong and weak areas. The app will require farmers to provide necessary information about how they are producing, and based on this information, they will get a report. The report will have detailed information about their footprint, strong and weak areas. This will provide farmers with valuable insight of how sustainable their farm is, and most importantly, where are the key areas that need more work. The results can also be used by the farmers as a proof that their production is meeting the standards and that it is sustainable produced, and will also help them sell their production to more markets and will open the doors for more fundings. On the other hand, with the help of our application, policymakers will have another option in which they can get data from. By doing so, they can double check the data from our app with the data from government institutions. This will show them how much of an effect the already created policies have had and if there is a need to adapt them to better suit the needs of the farmers. Not only that, but they can use the information to better target specific areas where farmers are experiencing challenges.
So how our application works. Our application is based on several modules. Module for the farmer, reporting module, data analyzation module, and connectivity module. Each of the modules is connected to a database we have created. The application will also be based on blockchain technology, which we believe will serve as a way to prove the authenticity of the information. Then the application requires farmers to first register in our system. After they do that, they need to fill in the necessary information. And based on based on this information, our footprint algorithm, which is based on the GHG protocol, will give a calculation of their footprint. The report section will contain the historical data of the farmer. There will be an option to receive a PDF report containing a detailed description of the information. Farmers will be able to extract raw data in different formats, and they will have the ability to compare the results by different criteria. Data analyzation module. This module contains the raw data of all of our users without their personal information. Here, both farmers and policymakers can filter the data and use it for their own analysis. There will also be an option to extract the needed data in different formats, and we'll have connectivity options with third-party apps. And then we come to our connectivity module. Our application can be connected with third-party apps for data sharing. Example for that can be if farmers are using a smart irrigation system, they'll have the option to connect it to our system and data will be automatically transferred to the farmer's profile. Data sharing works both ways. So if a user wants to transfer information from our app to another, they're free to do it. Next slide, please. Like I said, we believe that structured, comparable, relevant, and regular data, which can be analyzed in time, is crucial for meeting our goals. Our application presents opportunity for both small farmers and policymakers to take out the most of the information in order to achieve the set objectives in time. Our application's name is B2 because we really believe that by working together, And by using the right tools, we can achieve the goals so that there will be a future for our next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Team B2. Dead on 6 minutes, which we very much appreciate. And I think a fascinating app to deal with a very present problem about tracing and measuring the footprint of everything we do and bringing that information closer to consumers. I wonder if any of our jury members have any questions for Team B2, or whether we can move on to Team Garbatar. Adriana, I believe you have a question.
Yes,
May
thank
just
you.
need a second to spotlight you.
No worries. Thank you so much, Boris and Antonio. It's very interesting, and I think that it's a very relevant subject that you have decided to treat. The data, definitely, it can be powerful. But then what I understood is that you are building a data tool. So if you can expand a bit more on the how this will help on the access to funding and direct markets for the farmers, that would be ideal. Thank you. And also another aspect is, what limitations do you envisage that this would have? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Tamara, you had a question as well before we go back to Boris and Antonio.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for a very good presentation and a very clear one. I concur with my fellow judge that I think it's very interesting as an app. I saw that you mentioned regulation, that it would also include this part, and I was curious to see, are you looking into kind of global regulation, country specific, and how would you go about that?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. About the first one, how it will enable access to funding. We believe that right now, with the sustainability topic becoming relevant, more funds and banks will require businesses to first have a strategy for a sustainable migration. And if they can show to those funds and banks that a plan, a strategy for their sustainable migration, they will be able to access more funds. Also, if you're a farmer and you currently have made progress in your sustainability, you can also, for example, go to banks and take credits on lower interest rates, which I believe is going to happen really soon. It's already happening here in Bulgaria. About the access to direct markets, the principle is the same. Big food chains and other markets will require producers to have their production to be sustainably produced. So with our tool, they can measure their footprint. They can have like something like, we want to our algorithm, our methodology to be certified, and thus will be able to present a certificate that their production is sustainably produced. And I believe that this will give them more access to markets, and those who don't do it will eventually have issues with selling their production. The second, can you repeat the second question, please?
The limitations that you envisage.
The limitations with our application. Well, that's a tough one. Right now, what we've come up to when we first came up with the idea is the way to give them a report about strong and weak areas. In order to do that, we need a lot of information. So first, we need to gather a lot of information in order to have the ability to compare it with others. For example, by region, if you're a farmer here in Bulgaria or you're a farmer in Greece, there are different regions. So we need this information from all of the regions. And then you can better target the farmers, because the soil here in Bulgaria is not the same as the one in Greece, for example. And third question, sorry.
So I had a question regarding the regulation. You mentioned that it was access to what regulations there are, and I was wondering at what national level what there would be a national, regional, global level. And I think my fellow judge, Mr. Malatella, also has a question.
Yes, true. I have a question. One is very simple. You talked with your connectivity module. Which services are you linking to for the farmers? And then the other one is based on your design. Did you really talk to the farmer? Which farmers? Did you ideate with the farmer? You mentioned this, and you mentioned all small farmers are like this, but is there a real use case of the challenges these farmers are finding? If you did after your design of your application solve those problems? Oh.
Thank you. About the regulations, we want to start this application here in Bulgaria. So we want to test it here, but we really find it, we really want to expand it to globally, so that we can have a unified system that can be accessible to both farmers and policymakers, because then the information will be better. And yeah, and regarding the next question about the connectivity module, we haven't had the time to think about which applications we will be able to connect to, but our idea is to connect to apps such as smart irrigation systems and other that are connected to the farmers and farmers are using. In order to come up with this idea, I personally have a lot of friends that are in this sector here in Bulgaria, and I spoke to them and they said that they had these very issues that we mentioned before, that the small ones, I'm talking about small farmers, they've heard about sustainability and ESG, but they're not informed, and the work is so much with their in the farms that they are putting their sustainability migration like they're like on the outside. They don't think so much about it. So what we're trying to do is to come up with an easy to use application that will make them start to think about it without being making them how do I put it more clearly, without them facing the challenges. I mean, without thinking about the sustainability topic as something that is so hard to do. We want to ease it for them, and in order to do that, we need both farmers and policy makers to adapt, because right now we have regulations.
Boris, just in the interest of fairness to the other teams, I might ask that we end the Q&A there, just in the interest of time. The jury has bombarded you quite a bit, so we may have to move on to the second team. But thank you very much for your answers to those questions. And thank you very much to Team B2 for a fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We can now move on to our next team by the luck of the dice, which is Team Garbatella. Javier, Carlota, Raul, you have the floor, and please let us know when you're sharing slides if you choose to do so.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. So Javier, go with the slide.
I'm sorry, 1 second.
Okay, so good morning. We are Garbatella team. We are very grateful to be here. We are 3 students and workers coming from 3 different but I would say, complementary spheres. Raul is an anthropologist, Javier is a food process engineer, and as regards me, I study sustainable development sciences.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity and for being shortlisted with our idea. Nowadays, the apps that are most successful are the ones that connect people. Okay, we focused on the next slide. Here we brought two examples, which are Airbnb and Vinted. Both of them connect different people that in the past weren't able to find a platform where they could be connected. For example, Airbnb is a platform that connects flat owners with temporary tenants, and our app's goal is to connect small-scale producers with consumers. The issue that our application is meant to address is spatial and relational proximity between consumers and producers, which indeed today the food that could be produced, processed, and packaged locally is transported maybe to the other side of the world. And this causes a number of negative externalities, especially in environmental and social terms. So our proposal is to work on proximity as a key element for transitioning to a more sustainable food system. This app would practically tackle these three challenges. The first one is the lack of communication between the producer and the consumer, as well as the depersonalization of the producer. The second one is the difficulty of transforming a business into a sustainable one all by yourself. So this app will propose numerous solutions and manageable steps towards sustainability without having to spend their own money in professional consultations. And last but not least, marketing campaigns, or the visibility the small-scale producers can have, is one of the considerable differences between them and the big companies in the agri-food sector. The amount of money a small-scale producer can invest in marketing campaigns is significantly smaller to the one these big companies have. Through this application, as a reward for completing the monthly challenges, they will be able to access free campaigns that are better addressed to possible consumers. Now, my teammate Carlota will continue in the next slide.
With the slide. Okay. So, given these premises, it is now necessary to understand how these applications actually contribute to transform the system into a more sustainable one by improving the proximity between consumers and producers. So we wanted to have a very practical and user-friendly app. So from the producer's point of view, the specific target is small-scale producers, according to the FAO's 2018 definition. So each producer will receive monthly a challenge to complete. The challenges can be, for example, create 100 liters of biofuel of second generation, or organize a school trip with local students on sustainable practices, etc.
So I'm going to explain how the consumers experience works. Basically, the consumers will have to create their own profile stating their dietary options, whether they are vegans or not, or have a halal diet, and so on. The type of products also that they are interested in, and many other statements. The app interface will consist of swipes. The user swipes to the right if they like the producers and all its characteristics, and left if they don't. It's possible to see it in the presentation. The app is designed for all the people who are sensitive to social and environmental issues, and who are willing to personally support the construction of a more sustainable food system by buying local products and getting closer to the source of production of the food that they consume.
Exactly. To sum up, the main advantages this app offers is it creates a network of sustainable producers and consumers. It builds a community that rewards the advances towards this sustainable production we were mentioning. From an economic point of view, the producers expand their sales pool while the consumer skips all the entities that are between them and the producer, lowering the food price. and it establishes a strong virtuous practices in the food production process, which in the long run make the system more sustainable and greener.
Okay, so thank you for listening. This was our team's proposal to push the food towards a more sustainable system. We hope you liked it, and if you're interested in obtaining more info, but I suppose that you're going to have some questions for us, but here's the number of our captain's team. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Team Garbatella. Adriana, I saw you nodding vigorously on having a question. Do you want to start us off on Tinder for green opportunities?
I wanted also to give the opportunity to my fellow judges, but yeah, I can start. So thank you so much for the presentation. So I think that it's very interesting, the component of the community, or like a kind of even tweet type of Tinder-like feature that you designed in there. I was wondering then, where would you be starting if you have a specific context? And also the education component, how is feeding into the interactions? Because you mentioned that there is like a certain form of capacity building, either on the consumer side or on the farmer side. So how is that playing there? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. So for the first part, you were saying how can we start? We were thinking of starting in Italy, since the three of us are living here, and we are really interested in working on the food systems in Rome, particularly. So this is our like Kickstarter. Carlota, for instance, she's working at an international organization, and she is the focal point of numerous small-scale producers with the FAO. So we would be starting in Italy, and also this capacity building that you were mentioning. That's one of the first points that we want to address with our app. So the first steps, or the first phase we would like to implement, is to raise different awareness campaigns and to create a trend in social media amongst producers and consumers to start using our app. I don't know if I've solved the question, or you want to clarify.
Did we have another question from our jury? We can take about one more before time pushes us on. Tambani, Tamara?
A very quick question is, I see that you are linking consumer to producer, but specifically, what are you linking? Are you linking the diet to a producer, or are you linking a specific request to a specific product? I think this is, for me, very key, what the linkage is. In the example you put, Airbnb, it links rentals of a flat to a person, very specifically. I just want a very quick comment on what is the linkages between your model.
Okay, so due to the time limit we had, we couldn't develop it, but on our document we clearly stated that the key is that the consumer will suggest to the application their preferences and what do they want to buy there. So that's the key link to connect each consumer to the producer they want to buy from. I think that might solve your question.
May I add just one thing? And also due to the limit of the time we had, also I'd like to add that the more challenges that the producers complete, the more they're getting visible in the application. So according to the preferences of the consumers, they will be more or less visible according, yes, to the preferences, to the diet choices that the consumers actually have, and also the preference related to the food they want to buy. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Team Garbatella. And now we'll push on to our final team, team winners, self-named team winners, but so far team shortlisted, but team winners. Maximilian, Varun, the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Varun will start now.
Can anyone see a slide?
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. That's good for us. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, Maximilian and I will be presenting our app called the Green Crop. The aim of the app is to contribute towards the sustainable use of fertilizers. So here's what we'll be covering today, beginning with why the app is needed. We'll be looking at the key points, the functionality, and then going to the inputs requirements, and lastly, with the way ahead. So the app is needed because there has been an over-dependence on the use of fertilizers for years now, even decades. There has been reduced yield per unit of fertilizer, leading the farmers to use more and more of fertilizers to ensure that they have the same output as they had in the previous years. This has translated into increased costs for the farmers, thereby meaning lowered profits for them, as well as for the environmental degradation resulting from the fertilizers is well established. It happens in soil, made by water bodies, and in the general atmosphere. So there is a need for having an app for tackling this theme. Regarding the key points for our app, the target users are both farmers and policymakers. Our rationale has been to address the critical issues facing both these relevant stakeholders and also promoting the best practices relevant for this theme. For farmers, this critical subcomponent will be scientific fertilizer usage, and for policymakers, it will be the knowledge sharing and capacity building initiatives. We'll be touching on this in subsequent slides. We aim to propose using Brazil as a pilot project for this app. The reason is that the country has a high import dependence, close to 85 to 90% of the fertilizers are imported. And in the National Fertilizer Plan, which has been recently implemented, there has been recognition of this by the government. And so it would be interesting to have this app launched and sort of improved in Brazil for starting. So once the user has downloaded the app, this is the first screen they will be seeing. Depending on the profile and the region they select, and depending if they have chosen a policymaker in the profile in the earlier section, this is the home page that they'll be looking at. So these are the three options. Under the database or policy framework, all the relevant global policies related to fertilizer uses, such as there has been one called the International Code of Conduct for the Sustainable Use and Management of Fertilizers, long name, but it was enacted by FAO and other, I guess, they were member countries and also IOs that were present back in 2019. So it will incorporate similar such policies that the policymakers at the regional level could have a look at it. There will be a collection of informative videos, and there will be a dialogue platform where a policymaker could connect and interact with different policymakers, both regionally as well as internationally. So if a policymaker had gone on the informative video section, this is where it will lead them to. Under the recent facts and findings, the objective is to have videos that will help them sort of enlighten themselves as to what are the recent developments and happenings regarding this theme of fertilizers and sustainable agriculture farming, so that they can update themselves. And when they have those interactions with the farmers, they could use those facts so that to motivate the farmers to sort of adopt those practices. There will be success stories, short clippings of policymakers that actually led and made that development happen in those regions, so that the policymakers, other policymakers could learn from their insights and implement the same. Lastly, in terms of strategic communication, the idea behind this subsection is to enhance the soft skills of the policymakers, so that once they are engaging with the community of farmers, they can really stress on the communication and then sort of motivate them to make the push towards a greener, sustainable farm.
Coming now to the farmer homepage, there would be the main target, the fertilizer calculator, as well videos on sustainable farming practices, and they have the option to ask questions to an expert. So if you would click on fertilizer calculator, you would come to the following page, where you would have to select which crop you're farming, which season, the area of your field, as well as the preferred fertilizer. And if you have a soil report available, you could also fill that out. This could be now an example of what nutrition values would be asked in the soil report. So just to make the data more precise for the fertilizer calculator. And then when you come to the results, you can either view the full report, download it, or also get more information on sustainable farming, which will link you to the videos, or again, ask questions. And then those are 2 example videos just from the FAO YouTube channel, which we found on the internet, but there could be also other videos which the FAO could do only for this project. We come now to the input requirements that are needed for the app. So on one hand, the fertilizer calculation mechanism has to be more specialized, because we just gave an example, but this is not a 100% clear formula. Also, the requirement of the soil report is an input requirement in the case that the results will be way more accurate if the soil report is available from the farmers. And also the content for strategic communication videos that Varun just mentioned have to be created. And then also the participation of policymakers plays a big role, because they are the ones who have to be proactive. Yeah, can you come to the next slide? Can you open the next slide, please? All right. And then the way ahead, which will be the future prospects on one hand, which could be adding a feature in the discussion forum of the policymakers, where it enables them to have a one-to-one messaging add-on, or also the report on overall yield, which means that the farmers would report after they had their season done, what yields they succeeded with the fertilizer that the calculator gave them. And the limitation could be that there are variable factors such as change in weather or pest attack that cannot be calculated in the fertilizer calculator and the yields. So those would affect also the farmers, as well as tailoring of the sustainable policy frameworks, which is really clear, I think. So yeah, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Maximilian, Varun. Perhaps one question, if any of our jury want to be first cab off the rank. Yep, Tamara.
Thank you. So first of all, I didn't have a comment for the second team, but to all of the teams, well done. So far, all of them have been really, really interesting and very thought-provoking, I think. I have a question here. I see it's a lot about fertilizers, and I understand where you're going in that, and I really like the fact that you're targeting both policymakers and farmers. But one thing that struck me was, if you're trying to aim an optimal use of fertilizers, have you thought as well about thinking about providing information on alternative methods for farming that are more on permaculture, more biological type of solutions, and so that are not necessarily requiring only fertilizers? Just a side thought.
Thank you very much for your question. I would like to answer it. I think what we would think of that is that we would add that on the video section for the farming. So just in general, sustainable farming was not only for fertilization, obviously, like we were thinking more of that also in including it there. Just the option, because the overuse of fertilizer is a big problem, right? And I don't know if all the farmers can now just stop using fertilizers from now, like from one day to another. So that was one tool on fighting that issue.
Thank you, Maximilian, and thank you, team winners. Thank you to our jury for those insightful questions. We now move to the next part of proceedings, at which point our jury sequesters itself virtually for a discussion of which of these fantastic proposals was the first, second, and third placed finisher today. While we here in the room deep dive into some of these questions with our fireside chatters, Rolf and Kathy. So thank you very much to all of the teams. Tamara, if you and your jury colleagues could come back in half an hour with a decision or the story of a completely divisive three-way tie, really either way, but hopefully the former, that would be wonderful. And in the interim, it is my pleasure to talk to Rolf and Kathy. I think a great place to start here might be to get both of you, first of all, to introduce what you do, and then perhaps if you had any reactions to some of what you've seen from the teams today.
I mean, I really enjoy all this presentation. I think it is great. And it is a good time to talk about agriculture, to talk about agri-tech and food security. So just to introduce myself, I'm Kathy, and I work for the International Trade Center. In case you don't know who we are a joint agency of the World Trade Organization and the United Nations. And what we do is we support small and medium-sized enterprises export their product globally. So I'm part of the tech sector development team, and I'm often asked, oh, the UN, you are in that space of tech. Yes, for us, because we believe in entrepreneurship, especially tech-driven entrepreneurship, because we know that it has the opportunity to create jobs, but also economic growth and innovation. So this is why, as a team, we're expanding our interventions, mostly in Africa. So right now we support 10 emerging countries in Africa, mainly East and West Africa, providing technical assistance to more than 200 tech startups and IT BPO companies, but also market access. We also do policy, so working with governments to provide more conducive business environment for those tech startups and IT and BPO companies that we work with. And finally, we do also the work with the institutions, so the business support organizations. And what we do there is more strengthening them so that they can better support their clients, who are also our clients, so the tech startups and IT companies. So yeah, in summary, this is what we do, and I look forward to this discussion with Rolf.
Hello, good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. And just as a very first reaction to the presentations, I'm really delighted to see that it sort of spurred young people to think about tech solutions for agriculture, and that not only do these young people bring their energy, their knowledge, etc., their enthusiasm, but particularly you have seen how much they have incorporated environmental dimensions, sustainability, etc. So this is very good, and I think it's very much a sign of things to come. Also, I think that another feature, which hopefully is another sign of things to come, is a renewed interest in agriculture. Because, I mean, some time ago, there was a feeling that this was an old-fashioned topic, whatever, or just a topic for poor countries. And I think that, as we have seen here, it's not at all the case. And the importance, I mean, of course, for us who are working on the very poor countries, there's no doubt about the importance of agriculture, but for everyone in the world, the importance has become very dramatically obvious since the beginning of the war in Ukraine and all its consequences. So if I can introduce myself briefly, I am Rolf Träger. I'm the chief of the LDC section in UNCTAD, so that's the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. So our main task is to do policy-oriented research on the least developed countries. For those of you who are not familiar with the least developed countries, it's basically the world's poorest 46 countries They are mainly located in Africa, so it's countries like Malawi, Burkina Faso, Zambia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, but also in Asia, countries like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Bhutan, but also Haiti. And so our research materializes particularly in one annual report, which is called the Least Developed Countries Report. But we also do more in-depth country reports, particularly related to LDC graduation. And we work with these countries' policymakers. And we have very close policy dialogue with policymakers in the LDCs, but also policymakers of what is called their development partners, which are either bilateral donors or donors or people who intervene in these countries' development from multilateral or regional agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rolf and Kathy. Kathy, I might turn back to you, especially I think Team B2's and Team Gabatella's products really reminded me, at least tangentially, of a project I know you've worked on that connects farmers with consumers. I hope you know which one I'm referring to. This is going to be a strange question, but I wonder if you could talk through a little bit about sort of the work that ITC has done in that space, some of the challenges these teams might face if they try to develop their app in practice, but as well as some of the positive impacts that you can have through that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I enjoy pretty much these two solutions because they remind me of a lot of tech startups that we work with, especially one called Isoko in Ghana. So they remind me a lot when I CB2, which provide access to data, but also financial services. And so the reality is that today is when we look at smallholder farmers in Africa, they face four main issues. And for the four of them are access to credit, finance, access to input. We can also talk about access to data and also market access. And this kind of solution, which is mainly in the segment of agro-digital financial services, provide a great solution for these smallholders. And what I like about it is because it's really data oriented. Today, when we talk about access to finance, the main issue is the lack of economic identity of farmers. And today, with the data that companies such as B2 gather, we can build this economic identity for the farmers. So by collecting farmers' information and as well as their farms, today we offer them a way for financial services to give them microloans, and therefore this is the pathway for financial inclusivity. And I think I really like that part about this kind of a solution. So yes, I think the challenges that they might face in the agri-tech sector, especially in African countries, is the lack of digital literacy, which comes often. So it takes a lot for these smallholders to adopt the solutions that are given by this great agri-tech startup. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done behind, of course. I think this is one of the challenges that they might face. We can talk also about the regulatory environment that I think Rolf will talk about. He's more of an expert in that. But yeah, also access to investment that I'm also keen to talk about later, maybe, which is a very important topic.
Thank you, Kathy. Rolf, before I throw it over to you, actually, this is really a question for either of you. I sometimes feel like people don't appreciate why credit was the first on your list of challenges for farmers in African developing countries. But I don't think a lot of people who aren't in the agricultural sector appreciate just why credit is especially important for agriculture. Before I don't know which one of you wants to take this, but could you say in a few words for someone who doesn't understand the sector, why is credit so important to basically making a livelihood as a farmer or growing a livelihood?
Yes, if I can kick off, I think that in discussions on take-up of technology, of innovation by farmers, particularly by farmers, as you rightly said, Dmitry, credit and the problems of access to credit regularly top the list of obstacles. And I think there's a whole series of reasons for that. First of all, it's a problem of access to credit. And why is it so? Particularly if we are talking about smallholders, about family farmers, etc., they quite often do not have access to credit. And why? Quite often because it's because of lack of collaterals, or it's also quite often because of risk aversion by local financial institutions. So they are very much averse to lending to agriculture because of the risk profile of the sector. And there is also another factor which is important, and particularly in poor countries. You have seen a feminization of agriculture, including among smallholders because of emigration of men to cities, etc., etc. And there you also have institutional obstacles to access to credit, in the sense that quite often women are either forbidden of getting credit or do not have what it takes to get credit. And also the fact that, particularly if you're thinking of smallholders and small producers, the fact that quite often these producers, these firms, these micro firms, they are not considered creditworthy. They do not have a history of credit. They don't have a record of credit, of taking loans and paying back, etc. So all because they are just too small, because they have faced these obstacles in the past, because they do not have even in the initial funds that you need even to open a bank account. Like, for instance, because before the beginning of M-Pesa, for you to open a bank account in Kenya, people were required to make an initial deposit of $700. This is an extremely high amount, which most small-scale farmers simply cannot afford. So that's why you get the importance of new tech-based solutions like tech-based microloans, etc., etc. Thank you.
And just to add on that, I think we should not forget the global context. We are in the post-COVID period. It has been hard for us, but it has also been hard for smallholders. They had less access, they had issue accessing financial services. We can talk about the shift of consumer demand as well as the closure of local markets and international markets that happened for a while. On a geopolitical point of view as well, now we have the war in Ukraine, which is also increasing so the price of input. So I was in Senegal a few months ago and I could feel it. Everything, all prices went up when it comes to commodities. And finally, we talk also about climate change, and today these farmers have more issues being, having productive, working productively and having all the crops that they used to have post-harvest. So in my opinion, it is a hard situation, and for that reason, those farmers need more than ever credit and financial support. And as Wolf also mentioned, the fact that these farmers are in rural areas, and so they don't have this financial inclusivity that we talk about. So this is why it is important to have those agri-tech startups that are generating the data that would encourage those financial services providers to also invest in these farmers.
It would, a lot of, at least several of the apps discussed today would allow a farmer to approach a financial institution with a great deal more of a sort of data foundation. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. The online profiling is great for that. So it gives information for these financial service providers to do the credit risk assessment, which is a good start.
Fantastic. I wanted to come back to you, Rolf, on Team Winner's sort of app, and specifically the policy advice focused element of it. I mean, providing policy advice to LDC policymakers is, I think, the LDC unit at UNCTAD's bread and butter in a lot of ways. UNCTAD's certainly probably the most trusted institution out of many among LDC governments for trade advice. I wonder if you could, there were a couple of ideas raised there about one-on-one mentorship, about putting policies at their fingertips. I'd just be really interested in your reaction to that, how it comports with your experience advising LDC policymakers, especially in the agricultural space.
Yes, thank you. So I think that the challenges that small-scale farmers face are legion, and we have mentioned several of them here. So lack of access to credit, infrastructure, to knowledge, etc., etc., and hence the importance of policymakers. And in this sense, I think that there is one particular type of policy programs, etc., which is agricultural extension, which was extensively practiced in developing countries, including in LDCs, but also in other types of LDCs back in the 1960s and the 1970s, but which, in a sense, started receiving much less funding and institutional backing starting in the 80s, 90s, etc., with the onset of the structural adjustment programs, etc., because the hope was that market mechanisms, so private provision of advice, of technological advice, etc., would take over. And the problem is that this does happen if you have market incentives. So if you're talking about relatively larger producers, larger scale producers, who do have credit records, who are financiable, who are credit-worthy, etc., etc. So they are likely to elicit, and that's what actually happened, this market response of the private provision of technological marketing, etc., advice. But this does not happen for the smaller producers because of all of these issues and the fact that the market incentive is not so much there. And so I think that after many, many years, the need for policymakers to provide this type of advice and to go back to their rural extension services, agricultural extension services, to remain again the number of workers going down at a very ground level, to bring technological advice on whatever, whether it's on the choice of seeds, on techniques of cultivation, or nowadays on information gathering, on how to gather information on weather, etc., etc. This is something which is going up again. So, I mean, part of it is has to be done by government services, but a part of this on the information part can also be solved by these modern apps, provided they are suited to the local conditions. So, for instance, in many cases, you have apps which are developed for poor farmers, where it's not so much a question of getting information in written form, because you still have quite often the problem of illiteracy. So information, weather information, price information, etc., comes in the form of vocal messages. languages. Okay, so you obviate the problem of illiteracy, but in any case, you have some private provision of these apps. So there, the role of policymakers would be to back the development and the spread of these apps, of course, provided that they are adequate to local conditions and supported. So I think that policymakers can also play a role in supporting the spread and the diffusion of these innovations, whatever their sources are. And I think that extension services can also play a role in this. And if I go back to the proposal of the team in terms of the use of fertilizer and how and what, etc., and what quantity, what type of fertilizers, etc., I think that this, in policy terms, this is pretty much related to applied research, which quite often is done by public funds, by national governments, national research institutes, etc. In some cases, backed by donors, NGOs, etc. And I think that this provides the background, the technical background, and the relevant, locally relevant knowledge, which then can be relayed and sent further to and diffused to farmers. And I think that this app is one example of some sort of an interface between this applied research on fertility types of fertilizers, applied research, etc., and the end users of this. But I mean, this also provides the link to the importance of ground research, which quite often has to be publicly funded. Thank you.
So just following up on that, I'm glad that you also mentioned the importance of having products that works in certain markets, which is not always easy. Today, what we need to know, especially in the African market where we intervene, is that farmers are really unlikely to pay for certain solutions. One of them is, for instance, advisory. And data is also challenging to monetize. So for the agri-tech startups that are targeting this market, it is very important to have viable business models and to take those elements into consideration. And from my experience, I see that I meet a lot of agri-tech startups that struggle to do so. And this can also show when it comes to investment because they don't always have the opportunity of raising investment. I think when you compare Africa to other continents and the amount of investment from VCs that are injected in the continent is very minimal, is less than 2%. The figure has grown in the last years. I think last year we were at 4.4 billion. We went from approximately 400 million 10 years ago to 4.4 billion. But most of the funds were injected in fintech startups. And I think the reason why is because those fintech startups offer to investors so an attractiveness. And this is because fintech is easy to scale, while it might be harder for agri-tech startups to scale because there's also this physical element, a lot of physical infrastructure when it comes to storage, warehouses, post-harvest infrastructure. And for that reason, it is less attractive to VCs. So I think it's also important to talk about the business model, how can this agri-tech really, adapt their product to market needs.
And where would you say, at least in the African context, the amount of VC funding that is out there, is it coming from African-based VCs? Is it VCs in financial centers like London and New York that's coming from? Where is it donors?
Yeah, so the 32% approximately comes for North America. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of US VCs investing in Africa. And what is interesting now is that to see that Africa comes second in the list. So you have approximately 28% of the money injected in the continent coming from African VCs, and only comes then Europe, which is at the third position with approximately 22%. This has changed through the years. I mean, if you look 5 years ago, I think Africa would have been third or fourth in the list, but it is changing now with these big VCs investing money in African startups.
So there is a change in a positive direction. There is money flowing, but it's going, as you said, initially to fintech startups, and those are the ones that are attracting it.
Yes, I mean, when you compare the amount of money which is injected in Africa, is still small. 2% is nothing, but for example, this year Africa is the only continent that show year-to-year growth when it comes to investment, positive growth when it comes to investment. So it shows that there is a growing interest, and Africa is not just a topic anymore, but it is in the map. Things are happening there. People are willing to invest in there. But yeah, this is not going to agri-tech primarily. We talk about fintech and health tech, and something which is important as well to talk about is the countries, geographies. Most of this money go to 3 markets, which is South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt. And then we can talk about Kenya as well. So, I mean, you have then a bunch of other countries that don't receive anything, or a very small amount of investment. So this needs to change as well, in my opinion.
But it sounds like, and Rolf, I'd like to bring you in here. I don't want to make you trod on James Zahn's territory at the investment division, but obviously some of these markets are successfully attracting investment, both FDI and sort of independent VC funding, while others are struggling. Are there any kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of, I think Kathy laid out, actually you and Kathy both laid out a laundry list of things that are making it difficult to attract credit and investment. Are there policy low-hanging fruit, and are there things that app designers and those who are considering pitching should be aware of in targeting where they go?
Well, I think that, as you rightly said, the big challenge is the very strong concentration of whatever external funds are coming, whether it's pure FDI, whether these are blended operations between public and private money, is the concentration not only in terms of countries, but also in terms of sectors of economic activities. And there, what we see is not, and particularly if you're talking about LDCs, not so much in terms of emerging countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Northern Africa, etc., but particularly for the poor countries, the fact of the matter is that you have a huge attraction of FDI for natural resources, but this happens to be mainly about mining and not about agriculture. So I think that there is a huge work to be done there to convince foreign investors to invest in agriculture. But even there, I think that there is also a choice which has to be made by policymakers about what type of investment in what type of agriculture are you trying to attract? Because a couple of years ago, there was lots of discussion about land grabs. And we know that there have been lots of these very large-scale acquisitions in developing countries, not just in LDCs, but I mean, that's not necessarily what will be most amenable to developing of local entrepreneurs, of local farmers, even if you have outgrower schemes, etc., etc. So it's again, I think there's a very strong role for policymakers to reassure foreign investors, but to reassure their own domestic producers and their own domestic entrepreneurs so that they don't feel threatened by the entry of these new big players. So I'm afraid there are no really low-hanging fruits. I think that this is really the hard slog of putting together different actors, domestic actors with interest actors. And I think there's a role of diffusing their respective prejudices, both of foreign investors concerning domestic markets and domestic economies, but also of domestic agents concerning foreign partners, foreign investors, etc. So I think that it's really a hard slog, and it's hard work which bears fruit in the middle to long term, but which has to be done. Because as long as you have most of FDI coming into mining, you get into all the problems of commodity dependence, Dutch disease, etc., income concentration, macroeconomic stability, and we know all of this. Whereas from a developmental point of view, if you develop local agriculture, the developmental gains are much more important in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of job generation, in terms of productivity increase, etc. So I think that that's where lots of effort should be done.
I was really hoping you did have some easy solutions we could implement.
Sorry for that.
Somewhat disappointing. Okay, well, I am reliably informed that our jury has returned and has reached verdicts. But perhaps before we turn to them, I could ask each of you. There'll be people watching today who are passionate about developing tech startups and tech solutions to some of the problems we've discussed today. Maybe starting with you, Kathy, if you could give one piece of advice to the apocryphal coder sitting in her garage, staring at lines of code and thinking about how to make the world a better place through supporting agriculture, what's a piece of advice you'd each give?
I mean, my advice is if people don't need your product, don't try to sell them your product. I mean, this is as simple as that. You know, you find a lot of entrepreneurs creating products and solutions that no one needs. There should be a good product market fit. And I think this is the most important thing. So when you think of a startup, or you think of, providing a solution, first make sure that it is something that is needed. So yeah, that's my solution. That's my advice.
Rolf?
Okay, I mean, in a sense, I would go in the same direction. If you're a coder sitting in our garage in California, and if you want to do something good, not just for Californian farmers, but maybe for much poorer farmers in Africa, before you start writing lines of code, go and have a reality check on what are the realities on down the ground of smallholders, small farmers, and what their real needs are. And then you start writing your code, because then your chances of success, of doing good, of your business, your own business model bearing fruits will be much bigger.
Thank you. And I think it speaks to the quality of the teams we had, that I think every team suggested starting locally. Their ideas was to begin deploying in their own backyard with farmers that they know, or farmers whose livelihoods they know, and then to branch out from there. So I think it speaks to the quality of all three teams that they've sort of thought about this, rather than sort of suggesting that they can drop a solution into Ghana without ever having visited. So I think that's fantastic advice from both of you. And thank you so much for an outstanding fireside chat. Now is the collective impatience of three teams. Yeah. I can feel the collective impatience of three teams boring into my psyche. So I will now turn to Joy. Do you have a spokesperson? Are you going to yell the results at once? We're really open to ideas. Adriana, you're nodding. Is that you volunteering to speak on behalf of the jury?
Well, I will check.
We will start together with the money.
Yes, we will all speak, but yeah, We would like to really extend thanks to the teams, and we think that it was a very exciting presentations. All of the 3 presentations were very good. They showed that you took some time to think about what you wanted to do. You read a lot around the issues that are there, from citing certain reports and looking at the needs of the farmer. I also want to say that in the last minute when we joined the presentation, I think Roll and Kathy said very important points that some of it resonated with us. For Roy, he mentioned what are the realities of the farmer. Always think about the realities of the farmer. Kathy mentioned that if your product is not needed, don't sell it. So I think those two actually really showed some of the things that we saw as we were really scrutinizing your presentation so we couldn't get 1, 2, and 3 in that order. So we got 1 and a tie, which is 2 and 3 in the same place. So it wasn't very easy to do that. I don't know whether Tamara wants to break the ice on this tie.
Happy to. So and by the way, I've gotten the okay from Dimitri that we could have 2 second places. I did check with him and he okayed this. Just to say, it was, as Tambani said, it was very difficult for us to make a choice because we saw a lot of pluses in both of the second places. And after a lot of deliberation, we just decided that we couldn't choose one. So that's 2 second place winners, so 2 second placers are Team Garbatella and Team B2. So congrats to coming join second. Both cases we thought that they and maybe I'll say a little bit about each one, and then I'll pass on to Adriana to fill in a little bit more about each one. So for Team B2, what we thought was very strong was the fact that you were providing data and data collection, and we saw a lot of opportunities for that. In terms of analysis, in terms of better understanding from the farmers level, maybe that could be aggregated at a more global level. And the one area that we thought could be maybe better fine-tuned, we understand you had very little time for this as well. So, but as you think about this going forward, is to see if it makes sense to, if that data can actually be collected, the quality of the data that is collected at the local level, whether or not that is of high enough quality for policymakers. So provide more guidelines. And so because Tambani here provided a lot of feedback saying oftentimes data provided by the farmers themselves might not be comparable or of the quality that you need for policy global level decision making. So that is one area that you could maybe investigate a bit further on how to ensure quality for the data. For the Team Garbatella, again, we thought the community building between farmers and users is a fantastic idea, and we love the promotion of more local connected farmers and market and users. The one area that we thought you could work on better in better identifying is the physical practicality of this. How do you make sure that the consumers and the farmers come together? Where do they come together? How do you deliver the food? How do you match this physically? Why would somebody as a consumer go to this rather than go to the local market where they could find local producers? So really think about kind of that value add that makes it a bit special, because it sounds like it's going to be a little bit extra work for a consumer or a farmer. So why would they do that extra step through your app? But Adriana, I know you had some thoughts as well.
Thanks, Samaras. Yes, so just first of all, to congratulate the teams, because again, as Tambani has mentioned, as Samara, you have all really, really good points and then very promising areas. So to complement on Garbatella's presentation, really enjoyed the way how you build the pitch. I think that it was like very, very strong. Yeah, I would say that we're discussing on the side of the adoption. How would this be done? And done in a way that it's engaging and creating the network effect that you were referring to when you were citing also the other examples of Airbnb or Uber. So why is the convenient aspect of that would make the user prefer to engage in the platform rather than in any other form? That's on that. And then for B2, also we thought that Yeah, Samara was mentioning the data aggregation, the impact of this data, but also the incentives for the farmer to engage in the data collection exercise as a whole. So this is something that, yeah, would need to be thought through a bit better, but overall, the choice also for the going for the data aspect, we believe that is really valuable. And then that leaves us with one candidate for the place of the winners, and with no secret, yeah, we are giving the prize to Green Corp, the Green Corp team. So yeah, I don't know, Dimitri, would you like to say something, because the plenary has come to.
No, a huge congratulations to all of our teams. I can't tell if you can hear us clapping on Zoom, but just rest assured we are. There were, I think there were phenomenal proposals. I don't know if you want to say a final word about what particularly stood out for you about Team Winner's proposal. Sure, just a quick final word each, perhaps.
Okay, maybe I can jump in too, so that I think we found them very structured. They really gave a thought of their app. They really put the farmer in the center of it. They realized that what you need and how you go there. So you could see the thought process there. Basically, when you look at their solution, it's really ready to scale and be used in different areas. Of course, we didn't. The word fertilizer doesn't strike good airwaves with people, but I think that what we were looking at is the scalability of your solutions when it's applied. Perhaps this could be a potential to add other forms of alternatives to fertilizer. But you communicated very well. We saw the feasibility of your solution and the impact that it can have. Over back to you, Adriana.
Sustainability and impact. That's a great headline. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Clarity and simplicity. Exactly.
Sustainability, impact, clarity, simplicity. Tamara, do you want to add
overall, well done.
So a huge thank you to our jury, a huge thank you to our fireside chatters, and most of all, a huge thank you to all three teams, indeed all the teams that participated in the hackathon. Thank you so much for getting involved with this. Congratulations to all of you, and especially to our winners, team winners, whose name didn't prove to be an ironic curse. And I'd like to thank you all for being here. Thanks again to the teams that made this possible. And to remind you that the fourth and final dialogue in our dialogue series with the FAO will take place on the 12th of December, and will focus on how we green subsidies, which is a very pressing matter at the moment indeed. So with that, thank you again. And until then, goodbye.